and switch this around a bit. Okay, so first things first, guys, we are making challah bread today, which, funny thing, I wasn't really looking at the yearly calendar when I was like, oh, let's do challah. This is kind of the 1 week out of the year where starting tomorrow, challah is not on the table because as we are heading into Passover. And if you know a little bit about Passover, you know that Passover is the holiday where risen breads, risen foods in general, are not part of the Passover table. So while we are eating our matzah, we are not eating our challah. Every other time of the year we are. So this is the one exception we've got through today to enjoy this bread, or you'll have to wait a week. Challah is made for lots of different special occasions, bar and bat mitzvahs, weddings, all kinds of stuff, Rosh Hashanah, lots of different holidays, aside from Passover, and even just, you know, the breaking of the bread on Friday at sunset. So it's a very commonly enjoyed bread, and one that is not just for this, this dough is one that's very similar to a lot of Easter breads as well, a lot of braided breads as well. So if you're trying out this challah for yourself later on, know that that this is a bread that is very similar to lots of other braided style breads throughout Europe and the States as well. So very close in proximity ingredient wise. Why is there no risen food for Passover? Well, I'll give you the Reader's Digest version, which is that the Passover story is all about Moses and the freeing of the slaves in Egypt and the crossing of the Red Sea. And basically, you know, that whole Charlton Heston movie with the Ten Commandments covers a lot of it. But the thing about no risen bread is there was no time to let the bread rise as they were escaping Egypt. So there's no risen bread commemorating that that holiday either. So yeah, there you go, the quick version. So I'm going to show you a couple of things here. I'm going to show you first my mise en place, and then I'm going to show you the dough itself and what I'm going to do with it in order to get it braided and into the oven. So my mise en place just means to put in its place, to bring everything together, and that's what I have in front of me, my tools and my ingredients to get everything together without having to reach for it and find it and, you know, shuffle around for it when, you know, before I need it. So first things first, I've got my scale. This is a digital scale. I've got egg wash. Egg wash is used to add color and shine to something before it goes into the oven. When you're in the breads class, you're going to use this quite a lot. I've got a bench scraper, which is a stainless steel, well, very dull sided, kind of a blade. This is going to cut through my dough without putting large cuts in my table. I've got a ruler because I want to make sure that my pieces are all evenly sized, and I have some parchment paper here, which I'm going to shape and bake my bread on. That has a dual purpose, and I've got a couple of trivets here so that I can show you my bread without, as it comes out of the oven, without it burning my countertop. And then, of course, I've got my dough. Now, this is 2 loaves worth of dough. They're both about 14 and some change ounces. I'll move some of these things out of the way until I need them. The first thing I'm going to need is my bench scraper and my scale. Now, as I'm taking this plastic wrap off, notice I'm only putting it on the countertop. I'm not going to throw it away yet because I'm going to need that later on. So I'm going to take 1 piece of dough and very gently, now this has been rising for about an hour, hour and a half. I'm going to try and keep its general shape as I pick it up. And I'm going to set this to grams. I know this might be a little difficult to see, but this is set to grams. I'm going to weigh this out just so I know for sure. So I've got 437 grams. I'm going to cut this into 4 equal pieces. So that's going to be 100, whoops, and 108, 9. 100, goodness gracious, I know math, I promise. 109 grams per piece, with one that's going to be a little different than the others. So to do this, now one thing in bread that you want to try and avoid is making lots of teeny tiny little pieces when you are scaling this out, because for the more pieces that you kind of have to cobble together to make one big piece, the more you have to fiddle with that dough, which kind of wastes a lot of time, but also misshapes the dough. So I'm going to kind of make a couple of little marks first. So I've got a general idea of where I'm cutting, so I get 4 even pieces, or close to even pieces, from the get-go. This one's a little bit on the small side, so it'll be my cobbled together piece. A little bit large. Still a little large. 109 is what I'm going for. 110, 112. I'm going to take one little small piece off and call it done. Okay, close enough. Next one, not quite as much fiddling. Gathering all those little guys together. And there I go. I've got 4 even pieces that are all in a row. Now, the reason why I want to keep everything kind of in a row, this is my first one, my second one, my third one, my fourth one cut and put together. So what I want to do, now that I'm done with the scale, I'll put that away, is I want to kind of keep in mind which one I handled first, because the more you handle your dough, the more it starts to kind of constrict a bit. It gets very elastic, it's very snappy, and like a rubber band, because there's a lot of gluten in each of these pieces, right? And that's the magic of bread dough. So when I do this, I'm going to allow it to relax every time I handle each piece. So this first one that I cut will be the first one that I shape. All right, so how am I going to shape this bread? I'm going to make a 4-strand loaf. It's known as a 4-strand loaf, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's going to be 4 strands braided together, allowed to rise, and then baked. So the first thing I need to do is I want to make sure that my dough pieces are the same size, but also the same shape. So when we handle dough, bread dough, to kind of shape into more elaborate pieces, we take into account how much we're messing around with them. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to, since it's already risen a bit, I'm going to flatten it just gently. I'm not going to like punch down, all that air that's already in there. I don't want to get rid of all of it and deflate it completely, because then it's just going to take that much longer to rise again. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of pat it into a little rectangle like that. And then using just my fingertips, I'm going to roll it and then squish it back and create a nice tight little roll. And every so often, as it starts to misshape a bit, I'll go ahead and kind of encourage it back into its original shape. What I'm doing here is I'm creating a nice tight little roll. There's a name for this. It's called a coil, C-O-I-L. So I'm going to make 4 coils just like this. Now, looks nice and even, about the same diameter from one side to the next. And I've got this little part right here where the end is now meeting up with the rest of it. I'm going to give it a really good pinch, give it kind of a little mohawk, or faux hawk, as it were. This is called the seam. And the seam is an important thing to know about, because this is actually, even though I've fiddled with it quite a bit, this is actually the weakest part of this piece of bread. And it's where, if it's going to split or misshape at all, it's going to happen right here. So I'm always aware of where that seam is in any bread that I'm shaping. Baguettes, Doesn't even matter. I always know where my seam is. So I'm going to pinch it to kind of give myself a little visual. And then because it's the weakest part, I'm going to weigh it down with the rest of the dough. I'm going to put it away. I'm going to put it way up here. That's my first one. Hold on a second. As I'm talking to you, I also have a loaf of bread in the oven, so I got to check that every so often. And then I'm going to go and do the next one. Now, that piece of plastic wrap that I said, "Ooh, don't throw that away," that is going to cover my dough, just like that. It's important to make sure that your dough does not dry out as it's waiting. I want it to relax. I want it to kind of, stop being so snappy, so elastic. So I'm going to just kind of let it sit there while I do the next one. This is dough piece number 2. And this time I'll be a little bit faster. There we go. Give it a little mohawk again. Seal that seam nice and tight. Weigh it down. Oops, got a little something there. Weigh it down. And that's going to go right next to coil number 1. Now, if you're really, really, really quiet, and if I shut up, you can hear the air bubbles deflating under my fingertips. We'll do it with the fourth one. A little bit of ASMR. Okay, your ASMR moment of the demonstration. I heard it, did you? If you didn't, that's okay. You'll hear it on your own countertop when you do this. Okay, so I'm going to fashion together my last coil there. Mohawk, mohawk, mohawk. Weigh it down and put it underneath my plastic wrap. Just like that. Okay, so anybody have, you did hear it. Oh, Rodriguez, I'm so glad. Does anybody have any questions so far? How do you know it's tacky enough when kneading? Oh, that's a good question. So there's a difference between sticky and tacky. And it happens that this dough is really good for being tacky, but not sticky. I'm looking for a piece of tape. Hold on a second. I'll show you just what I mean. Okay. So in bread, you've got the term sticky and you've got the term tacky. We're always looking for tackiness when we're talking about bread, because as a texture, it's the difference between pouring, say, some glue on your hand and some tape. Glue is going to kind of run down. It's going to stick to you. You're going to have to wash it off. You're going to have to, fiddle with it a lot. It is sticking to you. It's going to stick to anything, right? This is tape. That's tacky. It'll stick to you, but you can pull it away and your hand is clean. The difference between sticky and tacky is just that. So for this dough, it is normally on the tackier side. It will stick to you a little bit, but it'll come away. And that's just the composition of that dough. So when you're making this, and every recipe is a little bit different, when you're making this, it's going to be, I don't want to say tougher, but it's going to be a drier dough than you might be used to if you've been baking bread for a while. It won't be batter. It will be a dough that kind of comes together in your bowl into one big ball and slaps around inside the machine as you go. This is known as an enriched bread. There are lean breads, there are rich breads, and then there are enriched breads. Enriched breads like challah are kind of in the middle. If they are a lean dough, it would be something like a baguette that's very crusty and crunchy on the outside, very soft in the center, and not a lot of stuff going on. No milkiness, no egginess, no sweetness necessarily, just a very plain flavor. A rich bread might be something like brioche or a breakfast bread that has a lot of eggs, a lot of sugar, a lot of butter. Brioche is a great example of that. You can see it, you can smell it, you can taste it. There's a lot of extra in there. An enriched dough like this one has a little bit of the best of both worlds, where you have, there are eggs in here, there's oil, not dairy, there's light oil, there's eggs and egg yolks, a little sugar, a little salt, and that's about it, along with, of course, the yeast and the flour. Does that make sense? Right on. Your silence tells me yes. All right. And if you didn't see in chat, this recipe will be up on the site later on for you guys to try out on your own. Now, so it may have felt like I was blabbing for a few minutes there, and the reason for that is because I wanted these to relax just a little bit before I continue with the next step. Sorry about that. I'm taking one of the loaves out of the oven as we speak. So now it's time to go to phase 2. Now at this point, my dough is a little bit more relaxed. It is more likely to roll out smoothly this time around. So noting where that seam is, and you can even give yourself another little visual cue by just pinching it again one more time. I'm going to roll this out to about 14 inches long, and thus the need for the ruler. I want to be pretty close to 14 inches. And I want them all to be the same length and the same diameter. So the way I'm going to roll out my dough is I'm going to, you notice that I don't have any flour on my table. I don't need it. A lot of people think that you need to have flour on your table every single time whenever you're handling your dough, and that's simply not true. If you've got a dough like this that's tacky but not sticky, it's going to go wherever you want it to without the flour acting as a non-stick. Hooray, challah. Makes it very easy to handle. All right, so what I'm going to do is, in order to get a nice evenly sized, even diameter, I'm going to start with my hands, one on top of the other, and I'm going to just roll back and forth like this, applying even pressure on both sides. Now, I'm left-handed, so I handle this a little bit more deftly with my left hand than my clumsy right hand. So what I want to try and kind of keep in mind is that I usually go a little harder with the right than with the left. So knowing that, I'm going to kind of remember even pressure with my writing and my non-writing hand. All right, so I'm already at 11 inches. I'm going to go in again, being pretty gentle. And wherever I see an area where I'm a little thicker, I'm going to concentrate some pressure in that area. Wherever it's a little thinner, I'm going to lighten up my touch and just kind of avoid that area a little bit until I've got a nice even piece of dough. Now I'm going to keep it the same diameter here and here as I am in the center. I don't want to round this off yet. And then, okay, I'm a touch longer than 14. That's okay, because I know that this will snap back a little bit on me. The one thing I am going to do is I'm going to check and see where that seam is, so I can see it. It's hard to see on, whoops, hard to see when you're off camera. Hard to see from laptop screen to laptop screen, but I can tell it's right here. And I want to make sure that that stays facing downward. And there I go. There's my first one. Everybody's still underneath that plastic wrap because it's going to keep it from, whoops, It's going to keep it from drying out. We don't like our doughs to get too dried out on the surface because it makes them harder to handle later on, but it also will create a surface kind of texture that we don't really want. It's going to look it can look a little scaly, a little dried out, uneven. And ask any pastry chef, and they'll tell you, we're a little bit about looks. We want this to look just so. So uneven appearances kind of drive us a little crazy. All right, see, there's my seam there. So what happens if I go a little too long? And it's longer than the other ones? Is it ruined? No, you just kind of relax it back into place. And if it stays a little bit too long, that's really okay. Braided bread is very forgiving. All right, last one. I'm going to move these guys up a little bit. I'm sorry about the jostling camera. I'm actually kneading this around my camera stand. Cover them back up. Do that last one. Note where my seam is. All right. And now I'm ready to go to the next stage. Any questions so far? We good? Okay. All right. So now is the time that I take out one of my pieces of parchment paper. This is cut to the size of one sheet pan. It's going to fit perfectly inside. But I'm not going to do this on my sheet pan. I'm going to just do this on my piece of paper. So 1, 2, 3, 4. I know which ones are which. Now I can place them onto my piece of parchment paper. I'm going to just let them hang over a little bit. I want to get them pretty much lined up in the center, knowing that I'm going to have to kind of adjust my positioning here every so often. So here we go. Now, the thing to know about braided breads is that when you're doing this, you're going to kind of name your strands. You've got number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4. Now, they are named such so that you can kind of follow a pattern as you do this. The thing to know, though, is that it's not the strand that's number 1, it's the position that's number 1. So this strand here is going to be in position number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4. As these strands get braided, this guy over here that's in number 1 now is going to go all the way to number 4. And then this one becomes number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4. It sounds kind of weird now, but it will make sense in just a moment. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to anchor these guys together. I'm going to do that by taking the very ends, just the very ends, and I'm going to pinch them together really well. But just at the very, very end there, because I want to really be able to move these guys around. All right, now here's how we do this braid. We're going to bring strand number 1 over 2, under 3, and over 4. So what that looks like is this. I'm going to pick this up gently. I don't ever want to like dangle it like this because it's eventually going to kind of lose its shape and get way too long and too thin. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to very kind of thoughtfully, using a lot of intention, I'm going to just bring it way up over number 2 like this. And I'm going to tuck it right under number 3. And then position it over number 4, just like so. Doesn't look like anything good yet, but patterns repeat. And it's in the repeating of the pattern that we get the really good looking bread. So again, now we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 goes over 2, nice and tall, under 3, and over 4, again, nice and tall. 1, 2, 3, 4. Get it? And you can start to see there's a pattern forming. Now this is going to go off to the side a bit because that it just does. that's okay. Because once it starts to really go over the side here, you can just go ahead and very gently, keeping those pieces in order, straighten it back out, just like that. You got one really, really long piece here. That's the one that hasn't been braided yet. Same here. So don't worry about it. It's going to even out. And all this time, I'm checking and kind of keeping mindful of where that seam at the bottom is and making sure that it stays at the bottom. Over, under, over, over, under, over, over, under, kind of over. At the very end, you're going to have these little pieces that, are not the same length. They're kind of just kind of off on their own a little bit. You're going to bring them together as best you can, and that's okay. And then you're going to squish them together really well again, make them nice and flat like that. And then from there, you're going to just tuck it underneath that dough like that. You're going to go to the very beginning, maybe flatten it out again, do it again. And there you go. There's your loaf of bread. Now, because this is kind of a long loaf of bread, if you have a larger sheet pan than your typical 9 by 13, you can use it and it'll give it a little bit more room to grow. Or you can put your ends in the corners here and diagonally across like this. There you go. Guess what's going on top? That plastic wrap again. And you're done shaping. Ta-da. Now, this is not the only way to shape a braided loaf of bread. There are 5 strand, 6 strand, 3 strand, 8 strand, 4 strand loaves that are topped with a 3 strand loaf. It really only depends on how elaborate do you want to get. There are all kinds of braided breads out there. Ones that look like doves, ones that look like round loaves or circles. In Eastern European countries around this time of year, when we're about to celebrate Easter, some of these are studded with hard-boiled and colored eggs, and those eggs bake into the dough as along with the bread. So there's many, many, many things you can do. Now this is going to take a while, longer than I have you. So longer than I have your ears. So this is going to go and rise by itself for about an hour-ish. And what it will look like is something closer to this. So you're going to allow it to double in size. And that can take a little bit of time. Now, it depends on how warm your kitchen is. It depends on the general humidity and heat of the area that you're in. All kinds of factors. The thing to do is not only go by time, go by touch and sight too. Bakers, we use all of our senses when we're making bread. It's important. So very gently, I'm going to uncover this because I don't want to bake the plastic on top. But now this is ready to bake. And the reason why I know this is not only because of the doubling, but if I give it a little touch test, I can see that the dough is going to leave an indent. Now, if it leaves an indent, you want to make sure that it's kind of rising a little bit back up. And this is very slowly. Here comes the egg wash. This egg wash is 2 egg yolks plus 1 egg and just a squirt of milk, beaten until it's nice and homogeneous. And because this dough is really well risen, it's going to be kind of delicate. So I want to be very gentle with how I do this. I'm going to start from the very bottom and just very gently draw upwards so that I don't deflate my dough. And I'm going to do the entire surface. I'm going to try and get way into those little crevices and creases, because wherever that egg wash goes, you're going to get a deeper golden shine, a lot more color, a lot more pizzazz. But if you leave an area without that egg wash, you'll be able to tell. It'll still get brown. It's bread, but it will not be as shiny. It won't be as brown, as golden, as robust as the egg wash stuff. So this is going to go in the oven. And what you get is something that looks like that. So what you're shooting for is a nice kind of deep golden color. This has been out for about 10-ish minutes now, 15. A nice shine. And wherever those little creases are, in between those strands, you want to make sure that those too are also golden. Now this one's not as risen because I was doing a little bit of a rush job here. This first loaf isn't as risen as the second one that you just saw going into the oven, but bread nonetheless. So there you go. Now I'm going to switch to this here. Sorry, it takes me just a second. All right, so do you have any questions that I can answer? It is tasty, Nikki, it's tasty. I get really excited about challah. I can tell you what, it's not just fun to make, but it's also really delicious to eat. And when it's fresh like that, my my entire home smells like challah, which is not sad. It's a good time. People are going to be coming in going, hey, get some more of that. So yeah. It looks like sureki. Oh, that's a Greek braided bread, no? What side is the recipe going to be on? It's going to be on this site. I can't tell you exactly where, but there will be a link. What's the list of ingredients you need? Oh, that'll be in the recipe, but it's a very simple recipe. It's bread flour, it's eggs, it's a little bit of a non-flavored oil. You don't want to necessarily use olive oil, but like a canola or a corn oil or vegetable oil works beautifully. It's very fragrant, Micah, I can tell you. I'm kind of getting hungry. All right. Does the room temperature in the oven change when you live at 8,000 feet altitude? Yes, you will want to 8,000 feet. Lourdes, you're Colorado? Yeah. How did I guess? You will adjust that temperature. And it's completely leaving my brain. So this is being baked at 350 degrees. I think it's a 15-degree difference, is it not? We'll find out and we'll talk about it. Storage and shelf life. This is fresh bread. You know, it doesn't have a lot in it that's going to keep it fresh for very long. Got a good 2 to 3 days. If it's in a bread box or if you're wrapping it, it'll stay for 4 to 5. This also freezes really well. It freezes really well. So if you are baking it, but you're not enjoying it right away, that's okay. Go ahead and pop it into the freezer, allow it to thaw on your countertop for a little while, and you're good to go. A thermopen, yeah, you can use a thermopen or a thermometer. If you don't have a thermopen, you're shooting for about 200 degrees internal temperature. Gluten-free flour, not tried it on this one yet, but it does give me some ideas. Egg substitute, I'll have to think about that. Jasmine, am I taking up all your time? I can talk forever. I will use all my words.
No, you are fine. You are fine. Do anyone else have a question? So yes, and the recipe will also be emailed to everyone as well. So I know you guys were looking for the recipe. We will make sure we send it out in the email. So be looking for that after the presentation.
All right.
Yes, well, thank you so much, Chef Renee. I know your house is smelling wonderful over there with that bread.
I'll send you some over. Thank you, everybody, for the wonderful questions. And I hope to see you in one of my future classes. Take care.